Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel IronWings Command, bringing you real-time reports on the most intense global military developments. Today we follow a high-stakes confrontation at sea after reports emerged that a $248 million US oil tanker was targeted by the Venezuelan Navy, sparking an immediate reaction from the United States Navy and raising the possibility of a dangerous maritime standoff in the Caribbean. This event has sent shockwaves through international shipping markets, military analysts and global security experts as both nations enter a period of heightened military readiness. Initial reports indicate that the Venezuelan Navy intercepted the US-flagged tanker in waters near the Venezuelan exclusive economic zone, claiming it was violating territorial boundaries. Witnesses aboard nearby vessels reported seeing Venezuelan patrol ships approaching at high speed and using loudspeakers to order the US tanker to halt immediately. As tension grew, the Venezuelan Navy reportedly activated targeting systems on board one of its main frigates, illuminating the tanker with radar locks. The tanker continued on its assigned route, broadcasting that it was in international waters and legally protected under international maritime law. The standoff intensified as U.S. maritime command centers received emergency distress signals from the crew. U.S. Navy forces stationed in the Caribbean were placed on alert and a rapid response operation was initiated involving surveillance aircraft and a nearby destroyer tasked with escorting the tanker to safety. This development represents one of the most serious maritime confrontations between the United States and Venezuela in recent years. Tensions between the two countries have already been high due to political disputes, sanctions and accusations of illegal shipping activities involving Venezuelan oil. This latest incident has taken the rivalry to a dangerous new level where a single miscalculation could trigger a broader confrontation. According to defense sources, the Venezuelan Navy moved two additional vessels into the area and reportedly launched several warning flares near the path of the U.S. tanker. This action was interpreted as an escalation designed to force the ship to alter its course or stop completely. Shipping traffic in the region began diverting away from the confrontation zone as satellite monitoring detected a significant increase in Venezuelan naval activity. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy destroyer advanced toward the tanker at top speed with surveillance aircraft monitoring every movement in the area. The crew of the U.S. tanker was placed on emergency protocols with internal light-dimmed engines running at maximum speed and security personnel preparing for possible boarding attempts. In Washington, senior defense officials held emergency consultations to evaluate the situation. The Pentagon made it clear that any attack or unlawful interference with a U.S.-flagged vessel would be treated as an act of aggression, prompting immediate response under international law. The situation developed rapidly, with communications between U.S. and Venezuelan forces becoming increasingly tense. Maritime analysts believe that Venezuela may be attempting to assert control over shipping routes near its waters as a way to challenge U.S. sanctions and demonstrate its military capabilities. Venezuela has long sought to control maritime traffic through the Caribbean as part of its strategic defense doctrine. However, directly targeting a high-value U.S.-flagged tanker represents a major escalation that could have serious consequences. In Caracas, government media celebrated the move as a show of strength, with officials claiming the tanker violated Venezuelan territorial waters. However, shipping data obtained through satellite tracking shows the vessel was in international waters at the time of the incident. This conflicting information has fueled international concern and increased diplomatic pressure on both sides to avoid open conflict. As the Venezuelan frigates closed in on the tanker, the U.S. Navy destroyer established a defensive perimeter around the vessel, positioning itself between the tanker and the Venezuelan ship's electronic warfare systems were activated. Radar jamming signals were transmitted and aerial drones were launched to monitor the situation from above. Tension reached its peak when the Venezuelan ships reportedly locked fire control radar on the tanker and the U.S. destroyer simultaneously placed its missile defense systems on standby. Crews on both sides were on high alert, knowing that a single wrong move could trigger a military confrontation that would escalate far beyond the Caribbean. Shipping companies across the region issued emergency advisories rerouting vessels away from the area. International insurance markets reacted immediately to the news, with premiums for shipping through the Caribbean rising as fears of conflict grew. Inside the White House, national security officials briefed the president on the situation. Intelligence reports indicated that Venezuela had mobilized several coastal defense batteries and fighter aircraft as a precautionary move, while U.S. forces in the region remained on full readiness. Naval experts warned that the situation had reached its most dangerous point in decades. Meanwhile, the U.S. destroyer communicated a final warning to the Venezuelan Navy, demanding that all hostile actions be ceased immediately and that the tanker be allowed to continue its legal transit. Venezuelan forces responded with demands for the vessel to be escorted into their port for inspection. Neither side appeared willing to back down, creating an extremely volatile standoff at sea. As minutes passed, U.S. surveillance aircraft reported that Venezuelan frigates were maneuvering aggressively around the tanker, attempting to box it in. The U.S. destroyer mirrored these movements, matching speed and position, creating a tense line of opposing naval forces separated by less than a mile. The crews could see each other across the water. Every second felt longer than the last. Global reaction poured in as news of the confrontation spread rapidly across international media. The United Nations called for restraint and urged both parties to avoid escalation. European governments expressed deep concern, while shipping and oil markets grew more volatile with every new development. Maritime law experts emphasized that international waters grant freedom of navigation, and any Venezuelan interference would be considered illegal under international conventions. This strengthened the U.S. position and added diplomatic pressure on Venezuela to withdraw its ships. As darkness fell over the Caribbean, the situation became even more tense. Radar systems lit up the night sky, electronic warfare signals filled the air, and the sea was silent except for the sound of engines and radio static. Both sides maintained their positions, unwilling to retreat or escalate without a clear command. Back in Caracas, officials continued to claim the tanker had crossed into Venezuelan waters, repeating their stance on national television. The government portrayed the confrontation as a victory of Venezuelan sovereignty over foreign interference at sea. However, international satellite tracking data continued to contradict these claims, increasing the pressure on Venezuela from the global community. Inside the Pentagon, military planners reviewed multiple response scenarios, ranging from continued escort operations to direct engagement if Venezuelan forces fired upon the tanker. Defense officials knew that a single missile or gunshot could set off a chain reaction, pulling the entire region into conflict. Maritime security analysts warned that this event could set a dangerous precedent if not resolved peacefully. A successful Venezuelan show of force might encourage similar actions against other commercial shipping, raising the risk of more standoffs in the future. The Venezuelan ships maintained a tight formation around the U.S. tanker as the U.S. destroyer and support aircraft continued their escort mission. Additional American naval assets were reported en route to the area, creating a powerful deterrent force in the Caribbean. Meanwhile, diplomatic channels opened quietly between Washington and Caracas, with neutral states attempting to de-escalate the crisis. Behind the scenes, discussions centered on avoiding an armed clash while maintaining national positions. Both governments faced pressure from their own domestic audiences not to appear weak. As the hours passed, it became clear that Venezuela was facing overwhelming military pressure from the U.S. Navy, whose forces outmatched the Venezuelan fleet in both firepower and technology. Venezuelan commanders began reducing their aggressive maneuvers, though their ships remained nearby, signaling defiance but also hesitation. Global energy markets remained on edge as uncertainty over the tanker's fate and potential military escalation continued to ripple through shipping and oil industries. Insurance rates climbed and tanker traffic through the region slowed sharply. Inside the Venezuelan Navy command headquarters, senior officers debated whether to continue the standoff or retreat to avoid a direct clash. They understood that one missile or one wrong order could result in a devastating response from the U.S. Navy and potentially a much larger military conflict. Meanwhile, the U.S. destroyer maintained its position unwavering and steady, a clear message that any attack would be met with overwhelming force. The crew of the tanker reported feeling the immense pressure of the situation, but also expressed confidence in the naval protection surrounding them. By early morning, after hours of mounting tension, the Venezuelan ships began to slowly back away from the tanker, moving toward their territorial waters. The U.S. destroyer maintained close escort, ensuring that the tanker remained safe until it cleared the danger zone. Diplomatic statements followed shortly after, with the United States condemning the Venezuelan actions as reckless and illegal, while Venezuela insisted that its sovereignty had been violated. The confrontation ended without shots fired but left behind a deep mark on regional security relations. Military experts say that this incident may signal a new era of strategic rivalry at sea between the U.S. and Venezuela, with both sides testing boundaries and signaling their strength. Future encounters may be more frequent and potentially more dangerous. Maritime analysts also noted the precision and speed with which the U.S. Navy responded to the distress signal, underscoring Washington's commitment to protecting its commercial shipping interests around the world. This swift and decisive action likely influenced Venezuela's decision to back down. As the tanker continued its route under heavy escort, the world watched closely, realizing how quickly maritime confrontations can escalate into global crises in an age of high tension and shifting alliances. This was not just about one tanker, it was a signal to all nations that sea lanes remain contested and vulnerable. While the immediate threat has passed, both the United States and Venezuela remain on alert. Military assets continue to patrol the region, and intelligence monitoring has been increased to detect any new signs of aggressive action. The world may have avoided a direct clash for now, but the memory of this night will not fade easily. The crew of the tanker described the event as surreal, watching two navies face each other at close range, not knowing whether the next moment would bring war or peace. For hours they remained silent under the shadow of warships, knowing that the decisions of distant leaders could decide their fate. International shipping companies are now reassessing their routes and security protocols, with many calling for stronger naval protection for commercial vessels in contested waters. Insurance agencies have already raised premiums for transits through the Caribbean, signaling a lasting economic impact. Geopolitical observers believe that this confrontation is part of a larger pattern of growing maritime tensions around the world as nations test boundaries and power balances on strategic sea lanes. The Venezuelan action was bold, but the U.S. response was overwhelming and clear, leaving no doubt about the risks of challenging American maritime power. The situation also raised questions about Venezuela's strategy, as its naval capabilities are limited compared to the United States. Some analysts believe this was a calculated show of strength aimed at domestic audiences rather than a serious attempt to seize or damage a U.S. tanker. For Washington, the incident served as both a warning and a demonstration, a warning to potential adversaries that U.S.-flagged vessels will be protected at all costs, and a demonstration of rapid response capability that reinforces American dominance in the Caribbean and beyond. As the sun rose over calm waters, the U.S. Navy destroyer continued its mission while the Venezuelan ships disappeared over the horizon. The world exhaled a quiet breath of relief, but the echoes of the confrontation still lingered in the minds of governments, military planners and shipping companies. In the aftermath, both nations exchanged harsh words through diplomatic channels, while global powers watched carefully, aware that the next confrontation might not end without fire. The Caribbean has once again proven to be a critical flashpoint where economic power, political conflict and military strength intersect. The story of the $248 million tanker targeted by the Venezuelan Navy will be remembered as a warning of how fragile peace at sea can be and how quickly a single decision can push nations to the brink of war. As global tensions rise, such incidents may become more frequent, testing the limits of diplomacy and military restraint. IronWings Command will continue to follow every development in this unfolding era of maritime power struggle, where a single spark can ignite storms that reach far beyond the horizon. This was more than a confrontation at sea, it was a glimpse into the future of global conflict and the delicate balance that holds it back.